In this episode of OG55, I got the Italiano, Slimer, and Starship with me today. We're talking all the spicy, controversial topics. We're talking Rivers of America. We're talking Shooting Gallery. We just got all kinds of stuff. Monsters, Inc., possibly replacing Muppets. A lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Dive in today. Starship is back in the house. Up next on OG55. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG55. We're talking Rivers of America. We're talking Avatar, possibly taking over Hollywoodland and what that means for the parades. We're a host of topics today. George, I will let you get the party started. If you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me right here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There he is. And Slimer is back in the house at an undisclosed location. Slimer, it is always good to have you on, sir.
Thank you very much. Universal Studios actually gave me the night off today. I've been really busy. Halloween Horror Nights just started. They got me working in these houses 8 hours a day, scaring people. If you can't catch me at Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Haunted House, Universal, you guys can catch me right here on Orange Grove 55, or you guys can catch me on Twitter at Slime Square 84. And I'm actually just driving home from Epcot. So I'm everywhere, man.
There he is. And we got Starship back. It's been a couple months. Starship, it's great to see you, man.
Yep, I am back. And you can find me on Twitter at Starship824. And you can also find me on YouTube at Starship824, where I am actually working on making a video. It is in the works.
Yes. And I will actually link your YouTube channel in the description. Make sure everyone subscribes, so when he drops that video, you're the first to know. So make sure you check down below in the description. Okay, so first topic of the day, probably the most controversial topic of the day, is the Rivers of America going away at the Magic Kingdom. Now, George and I have done quite a few videos on this. Slimer hasn't been on the channel to give his take on this yet, and Starship, you have not either. And I'll start with you, Starship. You have an opposing viewpoint on this compared to me and the Italiano. So if you kind of want to set the table and kind of, let us know where your head's at in regards to the Rivers of America going away for Cars.
Okay. So originally I had posted a comment on one of the live shows that I don't want villains or Cars if it's replacing the Rivers of America. Now, my stance has since changed. I've been thinking about it more. I've been watching a lot more videos, looking at some concept art, and I've now reverted back to the popular opinion of just Cars needs to... No Cars. We can keep villains, though. Villains looks awesome. Keep villains. But fuck Cars.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Love it. Okay, that's interesting. So villains is good. Cars is bad. What for you personally, why Cars? Why is that the point of contention for you in regards to this whole move?
For me, it's because, and it's not just Cars, really. It's really that it's replacing that whole front half of the river. Because, so the river from, like, Haunted Mansion all the way to Big Thunder is my problem. Because it's the most aesthetically pleasing part of the river. It's beautiful. You can look across the way. If you're at... Splash, now Tiana's, you can look across, you can look at Haunted Mansion, you see the riverboat going by, and it's my favorite area of the park. Last 2 times I went to Magic Kingdom, I've spent the majority of my day over there. It's beautiful, just watching, sitting at the chairs along Frontierland by, Country Bears or any of the other shops or whatever. There's some chairs that you can sit there and you can just look at the river and the people going by. And it's a very, very for me, it's the most aesthetically pleasing part of Magic Kingdom, with the river and the boat going by. Now, the back half of the Rivers of America is very lackluster. There's not much over there. It's all overgrown. There's not many props. I'd say right when the train crosses over that bridge, after that point is when the river is extremely boring and there's nothing really back there, which is where Villains is going to go, which is why I don't really have a problem with them replacing that part with Villains. My problem is the whole entire front half, which I know is a lot of people's problem.
Okay, so aside from the back part of the river not being, or lack thereof being lackluster for you now, the more that you thought about it, what sealed the deal for you as far as looking at the concept art for Villains that you're like, okay, I can accept the fact that the back end of the river could be taken over by the Villains?
Well, I guess it wasn't. Well, okay. Here's what it is for me. See, I know we did our first video we did was all about nighttime spectaculars. Yep. So my favorite thing is nighttime spectaculars. So when I was thinking about it, you see Maleficent's castle up there. So if you position that in a way so that it's right where the fireworks launch and you could see the fireworks right above that castle, you could do sort of an alternative fireworks show like you do at Galaxy's Edge now does, where they have the different soundtrack to the fireworks in Galaxy's Edge. You could do that in Villains Land. And also just watching that video you guys just did, like I think it was today, with the reaction where he showed, I forget, Noble, is that his name?
Oh yeah, Noble.
Yeah. Where he showed the master plan of like how they're gonna, we don't know if they're actually gonna do this, but maybe putting a Villains hotel over there. I think that would be awesome. I think it'd be better than what we currently have. Cars, the jury's still out on that for me. I gotta see it.
That's fair. No, that's fair. That's fair, Starship. I mean, here's the thing. It's like the artwork for Cars, and I've said this before, it's kind of hokey, a little hokey. Like it's funny because our Cars Land had like similar kind of art, and it looked cool. I mean, it looked cool, but like it didn't ever look as cool as it actually ended up being, right? So it was like, okay, it's nice. And now it turned out spectacular. It's very, very aesthetically pleasing. But here's the thing. I can see where you're coming from with this, because not only is the Rivers of America just aesthetically pleasing and just gorgeous, it absolutely is, but it's also very much rooted in like Disney, what's the word for it? Like the Disney DNA, so to speak, right? With these castle parks. So I can see, look, there's no bones about it. I can see why you and a lot of fans are like hesitant about this, because like you're removing a staple of a Magic Kingdom, of a castle park, and you're replacing it with this Cars thing. Now the Cars thing will probably look pretty good, but for a lot of people, that's not really worth the trade-off, Slimer, go ahead, George.
Really quick before you move to Slimer, I just have to say, now for me, I would have agreed with that notion with the Tom Sawyer Island and the front half of the Rivers of America, until the fact I got to experience Disneyland. After the fact I experienced Disneyland with that Rivers of America, Tom Sawyer Island, it just feels like it's more kinetic energy, where if you're sitting at Cafe Orleans and you see the Mark Twain go by, or the Columbia ship going by, and they utilize Tom Sawyer Island for Phantasmic, it all has a purpose there for some reason. Then when I went back to Magic Kingdom and I'm looking at the Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island, even though it is a staple that opened with Magic Kingdom, but I'm looking at it and it's like, this just feels like a big waste of space that they could be doing something with it.
Well, and that's where I think Disney World management kind of dropped the ball a little bit, because they've been kind of stripping away, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they've been kind of stripping away a lot of that kinetic energy over the years.
Yes.
The boats and all that stuff. And then now we're kind of left with what we have, and now they're going to get rid of it, So it's, Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. And here's the thing too. Disney has to hit a home run with this Cars land. I'm telling you, this thing better be the most beautiful land they've ever done. I mean, it has to, because there are a lot of angry fans, But what say you, Slimer? What do you think about this, brother, in terms of them removing the Rivers of America for the Cars land?
So, do you guys ever have those new friends that you just want to hang out with all the time?
Oh yeah,
like you just make friends with them. You're like, man, I'm addicted to this guy's personality, or it's like a couple, right? Like you guys just do a couple days. Hey guys, come on over. Let's have drinks at our house because it's just so funny every time you guys. So I see rides as new friends, all right, and I love new friends. Okay, so when it comes to when it comes to Disney, having an opportunity to introduce me to some new friends, and by that I mean new rides. I'm really not as stuck on the fence when it comes to getting rid of old things for the opportunity to experience new things, as a lot of other people are. And if it comes at the expense of losing the Rivers of America, it's really not a big deal for me. And George, you hit it right on the nail. Like once you experience Disneyland's River of America, losing this is not really that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's interesting though with that. It's sort of, I feel like what Disney is doing, and I'm kind of curious about your opinion on this, Starship. I kind of feel like what Disney is doing is they're trying to create a bigger gap between Magic Kingdom and Disneyland in terms of the difference in what kind of park it is, to kind of create that difference. So it's not so comparable. They're two very different experiences.
And I like that. I like if Disney goes that right. However, to your point, OG, of what you said, they have, by doing this Cars land, and especially since it's nothing that is taken essentially from the movies. I know we talked about it during one of our previous recordings where it kind of gives off the Cars 3 vibe,
right?
Kind of like at the outback kind of countryside, in the dirt, sort of thing, off-road kind of thing. But they have to hit it right. If they give a kind of a Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama feel to it, or like can't. A toy, or even a Toy Story Land vibe. They can't. They cannot do that route.
This thing has, like I said, and I've said it in videos before too. This thing has to be gorgeous, like the one in California, like the grand reveals and the beautiful rock. It has to be aesthetically gorgeous. You know what I'm saying? But Starship, what do you think though?
Really quick. I'm so very sorry. Really quick to Slimer's statement. He's okay with rid of old things for new things. Hence, that's why I got a divorce.
Yeah, there you go. Well said, George. Well said. Starship. So, what do you think about my theory though of like them kind of like trying to make these two, like Disneyland and Magic Kingdom, so different? So they're like two very, very different experiences. Because right now there is that comparison, where fans kind of like, oh well, Disneyland this and Magic Kingdom that, and they're very comparable. Do you feel like Disney is trying to like kind of change the way Magic Kingdom is? Kind of drastically, so there are not so many comparisons and they're two very separate entities? Or am I kind of crazy to think that?
I think there's definitely an effort in the company now to differentiate a lot of the parks, because as we saw at D23, there was not a single clone announcement at all. Everything coming to each park was unique to that park. In fact, they made a very specific emphasis on Indiana Jones and Animal Kingdom, that it was going to be a new thing and different from all the other Indiana Jones. Right. I think they are making a very, I don't know what's, I guess, conceited effort. I don't think that's the correct word, but they're making they're making a very heavy, they're putting a very heavy emphasis on everything being different, new and original, and no copies, from what I have noticed over this past expo.
It's interesting.
Something else I wanted to bring up is that you're saying how Disneyland Rivers of America is much better, and I agree, it's way better. But I don't think just because the Disneyland version is better, we should just completely forget about Magic Kingdom. It's the most visited theme park in the world. I think we should. Magic Kingdom has, I feel like, it's always been seen as like cheap, copy of Disneyland, especially because I feel like Disneyland really in like the 80s really started to upgrade all of its stuff and change it a lot to make it different from Magic Kingdom, because a lot of the times if you look back at a lot of the 70s sort of stuff when Magic Kingdom first opened, a lot of it was basically the exact same as Disneyland, I think. So I think they've been trying to, like when they did that in the 80s, right? Or because they, that's when they added Big Thunder in Disneyland. I mean, they did that both, but you know what I mean. They changed Fantasyland. They updated a bunch of other stuff around that time. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is I don't think we should just say, oh, let's get rid of the Rivers of America at Magic Kingdom just because Disneyland is better. I don't think that's a good... I feel like that's a very slippery slope. Because if you say, oh, we can get rid of the Rivers of America because it's better at Disneyland, why can't we get rid of Small World? Why can't we get rid of Pirates now? It's a very slippery slope.
Okay, so to answer to your statement, what I think for me is not necessarily get rid of the river just because it's a comparison to Disneyland. If Disney were to utilize the river the way that they do for Disneyland and give it a solid purpose, then I would say, okay, then I have the argument to say, okay, then I think it should stay. Aside from that, I feel that Disneyland's is better. I feel like the way that Disney is treating the Rivers of America at Magic Kingdom, there's no solid purpose for it. It just feels like it's just a piece of land that's just sitting there. Because if you actually really go and watch to see how many people really go on the raft over to Tom Sawyer Island at Magic Kingdom, it's very far in between. And even to the Liberty Bell, or the Liberty Square riverboat, excuse me, that I don't know. It's just something about with the utilization that I just feel like there could be a bigger, better purpose for it. Now, also, Starship, you had mentioned it's a small world. Now, actually, OG and I were talking about that in a previous video. To me, it's a small world at Magic Kingdom. I'm sorry. That should be an insult to Disney.
Well, yeah,
the
but
way that it's represented. Now, for me, I wouldn't say get rid of it at all.
Yeah, you don't get rid of it. You
can't get rid of it. I'd rather take the insult than not have it at all. But I would definitely... They really need to upgrade that big time. Me personally, I even mentioned it. They should take what was supposed to become Pixie Hollow. They ended up moving Dumbo and making a double Dumbo over there. I would have utilized that space and moved It's a Small World over there.
Well, and give it the facade. I think that's what that attraction really needs in Magic Kingdom is the facade and a proper kind of small world, execution. I think that would be fantastic. Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I mean, you don't get rid of Small World, but I think in light of Richard Sherman recently passing and stuff, it would be kind of cool. Now, this is never going to happen, but it should happen. I think Disney should look at that and go, you know what? Let's get Small World out of where it's at now, and let's give it the proper Small World treatment in Florida with the facade and the whole thing. And we do it in honor of the Sherman brothers. I would love that.
I think another good, honor to him as well. I wonder if they'll eventually add in that extra verse that he wrote.
They played that at D23 when they had for those of you that are not familiar at home, we went to a remembering Richard Sherman panel with Bob Iger. Kevin Feige was there, of all people, but it was an incredibly emotional panel. But Richard Sherman wrote another verse for Small World, and that would be kind of cool, George. I would like that. But yeah, and this is the thing, and Starship, to your point, I've been complaining about this for a long time, actually, and not just with Magic Kingdom, but even with DCA and other things. I feel like maybe it's Disney Burbank, maybe it's Imagineering, but I do feel there's a Disneyland bias for sure, and it frustrates me because here's the thing. I get it. Disneyland is the one park, the one and only park that he stepped foot in, right? That he enjoyed. I understand that. And that should be special completely. But all these other parks bear his name. And
that's why in a way I blame Disney in that sense. And to Starship's point, it really is. Just because something may seem better at Disneyland doesn't necessarily mean get rid of it at Walt Disney World per se. But that's why I'm calling Disney out. It's like, well, then make it better. Just because it's not Disneyland,
Right.
that shouldn't give the excuse to just let it fall to the wayside.
Well, that's the same complaint I had with DCA. I mean, a lot of fans were like, "Oh, it's just DCA, just do whatever." It's like, no, this DCA sits just feet away from Disneyland, and it has Disney, the Walt Disney's name on the sign. Like, you put the same love into that park as you do Disneyland, and the same goes for the Florida parks, Magic Kingdom, Disney's Animal Kingdom, Epcot. All that stuff should get all the same love. You know, it's. Yeah, it can be very, very frustrating. What are your thoughts on this, Slimer, in terms of like kind of, you were recently in California. You saw the California bias or the Disneyland bias. We talked about it when you were down here, but what are your thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah, there really seems to be like a style versus substance thing that's going on between, East Coast Disney versus West Coast Disney. Disneyland knows how to do style and substance. Like, they really know how to combine the two architecturally, thematically. There's a lot more thought that goes into what they're doing, and you can tell that it's very purpose driven when it comes to like for example, like when you guys were talking about the mid-century modern architecture overlay that's going to be brought into downtown Disney. All right. It's very obvious that what they're trying to do is they're trying to represent the era that Disneyland sprung from. And
Right.
That kind of purpose-driven, substance and style isn't really. It really doesn't like it. It hits here sometimes in Walt Disney World, but then it doesn't here. There for as many fires there are misfires. Like they'll do Animal Kingdom. They'll do the Animal Kingdom Lodge, which is an incredible resort, one of the most highly themed resorts in the entire world, and then they'll roll out the Riviera. And it's like, is this the same company that we're dealing with here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's wild. It's wild the gap, right? The quality gap in some of this stuff. Starship, I want to ask you. So there's been rumors. Now, who knows? It's rumors. Disney rumors are. You never know. There's rumors that Disney is kind of second guessing this Rivers of America decision. This is the rumor. That maybe they're gonna go back to the drawing board, maybe look at these plans again, maybe figure something else out because of the fan backlash. Do you think there's any credibility to that? Or do you think that this is all just kind of wishful thinking by the fandom?
Oh, that's definitely wishful thinking. There's no way. If that were true, they would have Splash Mountain would still be here today at Magic Kingdom and Disneyland. And if that were also true, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride would be in Magic Kingdom. And there's many examples of if they were rethinking that, if they were truly rethinking it, we would have many rides that we don't have today because of it.
They got rid of my goddamn great movie ride.
Yes, they did, George. They did it specifically. They were like, you know what? This move, fuck George in particular. This is for George. No, but here's the thing too, though. In the Rivers of America, I agree with you, by the way, completely, Starship. And the Rivers of America is even more. It's even less likely than even like. Than like the Tiana's Splash situation, because here's the thing. If you were to poll normies, hey normies, like the soccer moms and the regular everyday folks, right, with kids or whatever, not us nerds, the normies, what do you want? You want the Rivers of America, or do you want a Cars thing for your kiddos? The normies are gonna be like, oh, we want the Cars thing. I mean, that's just how normies are. Disney, I'm sure, sees that and they're like, okay, you know what I'm saying? And it's sad. It totally is, because look, we're diehard fans. We love the history. We love the aesthetics. I've said many times on the channel, I'm a vibes over rides kind of guy. I like the vibes. I like the atmosphere. That's why I like Animal Kingdom. It has like 4 rides, but it's all vibes, man. It's awesome, So I get it. I totally get it. But yeah, I think you're right though. It's Disney's looking at the normies. The normies are like, oh yeah, we want the Cars thing, for sure.
I talked to a couple of my friends and people who aren't super into Disney, and I was like, this is what they're doing. They're getting rid of the Rivers of America, and then I showed them the Cars thing, and they're like, Oh, I don't care. I'm like, you
I'm
don't
telling you,
understand.
Now, I have a question for both Starship and Slimer because I want to get your guys' take on this. Now, I feel like that Disney should have been careful with how they worded this, and maybe I'm missing something, and maybe you guys can elaborate on this. But when they made the announcement that Beyond Big Thunder, the project itself, was going to be the biggest expansion in Magic Kingdom history. Now, as of right now, I believe with Villains Land alone, that is about 14 acres, give or take. Now, that's going to take partial of the back end of the Rivers of America, and then it'll run into land that they never used before, that they'll expand out. The front part of the Rivers of America, to Starship's point, is going to go for the new Cars Land area. Do you feel that's technically the right terminology that Josh D'Amaro used and Disney had used by saying the biggest expansion? Because technically, for me, when you use the term expansion, you're going beyond the berm of what you already used within the park.
Well, what's interesting about that is when they made the Cars Land announcement, I remember Josh D'Amaro said on stage, "This is coming to a reimagined section of Frontierland." He didn't say expansion for that. They did say expansion for Villains Land, though. And so technically they're right in that sense. But I do agree, it's not an expansion if it's rides that people can go on that they're accessing right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the weird thing too, and we talked about this a lot on the channel too, where it's like, I feel like Disney World is really bad at managing like their space. You guys have endless amounts of room, but I feel like you guys replace more than us. Like, how did we fit 14-acre Star Wars land in Disneyland and we only lost a barbecue and a petting zoo? Like, I don't understand this.
Well, see, I got in, well, not me specifically, but I was reading up on some arguments that were happening on fan boards, and a lot of people brought up this point, and someone went through and listed all the Disneyland attractions that have been replaced and the Walt Disney World attractions that have been replaced over the past 10 or so years, and surprisingly, it's been pretty comparable that how many they've replaced in each resort and how much has been added. It just feels, I think why people think that is because the rides, okay, for example, Mickey and Minnie's in Hollywood replaced Great Movie Ride. In Disneyland, it replaced nothing. In Disneyland, same thing, Disneyland and Hollywood Studios, oddly enough, Galaxy's Edge replaced the petting zoo and the barbecue place. And in Hollywood Studios, it replaced the backlot tour and the Honey, I Shrunk the Audience thing and the Lights, Moves, Action thing. But that's really the only thing that hasn't been replaced at Disneyland recently. I mean, a lot of the other things that Disneyland got at the resort as a whole, at least, were replacements like Avengers Campus, Bugs Land replacement,
Sure.
Pixar Pier, things like that. So, and Disney World has also gotten some expansion with, Remy's and Tron. So it's actually pretty comparable when you look at it. I was originally on your side where I'm like, oh, Walt Disney World only replaces things, they don't add. And then when you kind of look at it, you're like, oh, I guess it's the same. I think it's recent memory that the last couple things at Disneyland have been additions, whereas the recent Disney World announcements have been replacements.
That's fair.
I will
That's
say,
fair.
though, the fact that they got rid of a barbecue and a petting zoo, I will say, though, nothing gave me great joy than to eat a barbecue rib and pet a goat at the same time.
Yeah, right. You better wash your
Yeah, I
hands.
was going to say, like, did I miss this attraction completely? Because you want me to come spend money. You tell me I get a pet animal while I eat barbecue. I'm there. Take my money, please. Like, forget anything that's coming down the chute in the next couple of years. Just give me the barbecue and the petting zoo.
Now, really quick. Now, speaking of controversy, Slimer, I'm actually going to pass this off to you. If you can kind of elaborate a little more of how you actually felt towards Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland, because you had a kind of a different viewpoint than what a lot of people may not have view it as.
Oh, you guys want to go really controversial now, huh?
Well, let's do it, man. Let's just go for it.
I don't know if you're like trying to throw me under the bus here, but listen, guys. As somebody that as a East Coaster here, East Coaster, nothing felt more out of place than Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland. And I get that what it does is it opens up a circular loop around the park and it relieves a lot of that traffic on that side. Like, I totally get that, but it just doesn't mean that it doesn't feel out of place. And I'll tell you something else. When you look at the crowds over there versus the crowds over in Hollywood Studios, there's kind of like a different expectation of what people want when they go to Disneyland versus Hollywood Studios. So for example, Hollywood Studios, people sprint towards Galaxy's Edge, but when I was over there the other day, it was pretty bare. And look, I understand it was a little bit of a slower time. This was before the Imagine Key the Magic Key holders were actually able to come back, but it was pretty bare compared to Hollywood Studios. So what that tells me is, as somebody from the East Coast, the way I perceive that is the East Coasters are not there for Star Wars. They're there for classic Disneyland. And because of that, like, I just feel like it was just, it just didn't fit, man. I mean, like, it looked great. The way that it looked wasn't the problem. It's just the fact that it was in a Disneyland Castle Park. Now, if that was in DCA, I feel like, perhaps it probably would have, thematically blended in a little bit better. Also, like, at the chagrin of, Disneyland California Adventure maybe losing a little bit more of its California identity, which, it seems to be like the case here. But I feel like if they maybe did Disneyland, or I'm sorry, Galaxy's Edge over there, DCA, and then maybe like sprinkled in like Lucasfilm history, like the history of Lucasfilm, how George Lucas started the studio back in the 1970s and American Graffiti. Like, there could have been a way they could have captured Hollywood, California, 1970s, George Lucas, along with Steven Spielberg, because, they were good friends at the time, and, Steven also helped him stand up Lucasfilm. But that probably would have made a little bit more sense to me. But, the way that it just, again, Chapek did this thing where he didn't care where he was putting stuff at. And I think it was even Iger that announced this, but this was executed in the Chapek. But Tron also kind of suffers the same misappropriation of a great attraction in a land that it probably doesn't belong in. Because I mean, George and I, we go to Tomorrowland. We hang out in Tomorrowland all the fucking time, it seems like, over here at the Magic Kingdom. He lives in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I'm like, he's coming down next month, and guess where we're going to go? We're going to go fucking spitballs in Tomorrowland, But you go there, and it's like, wow, it's like Tomorrowland. What's going on, Magic Kingdom? Because, everybody is around the People Mover and the Astro Orbiter, and then there's this huge homunculus amount of space towards Tron. You're just like, this is where Tomorrowland should be, back here, but everybody's congregated around old Tomorrowland. But because of the way that it is built and the way that they just attach Tron to it, it just spatially and logically, it just doesn't make any sense. But they did it. They did it anyways. So look, man, I'm not going to get into a diatribe about Tomorrowland. I think that the place should be leveled. My saying is if you want to save Tomorrowland, you got to kill Tomorrowland. But that's another one of those Chapek blunders that I feel like shouldn't have happened. But it's there. What are you going to do? People enjoy it. Starship said, man, the normies, they don't care, man. They're just happy to have the Millennium Falcon, and I guess if the normies are happy, then Slimer's going to be happy. So
well, here's the thing too, Slimer. I agree with you to some degree in regards to Galaxy's Edge. I think that theme wise, I'm fine with it being in Disneyland, just because at Disneyland we're kind of accustomed. We've kind of associated
fight.
we kind of associate Star Wars with Disneyland because we've had Star Tours in that park since 87 or something, I think it was. So the Star Wars thing doesn't really bother me because I grew up with Star Wars being there anyway. But what does bother me, where I think that you're onto something, is Disneyland has a certain scale to it. We have a really small castle, and things are just, yeah, it's a more charming, intimate park. They did a good job with the transitioning to when you're walking through like Critter Country or whatever, you know, back there, and you go into it. It's great. But the problem is the scale is so big and the transition is so long that it feels like a separate park almost. It doesn't even feel like Disneyland. I feel like I'm going into another theme park, you know? So you're right. Something is amiss. And I think it's that scale. Go ahead. Brother.
Yeah, and that's something that I actually said to you when I was over there. I was like, the scale is completely off. So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's what I said when I was there. Scale wise, it doesn't match. It fits more, and that's why I say it fits more with DCA. As far as scale goes, it's a more modern interpretation of, or it's a more modern take of Imagineering that probably would have fit better in the DCA or third park or whatever. But Disneyland is kind of like a mid-century home. It's smaller, it's more compartmentalized. The closet, you know what I mean? Like, if you ever been in a house built in the 1950s and 60s, everything is small because people didn't have a lot of stuff back then, and architecture didn't have the jumps in that they've made over the last 20 or 30 years. And that's Disneyland, right? Like, Disneyland was built in the 50s and 60s, and sure, it's gone through some modifications and changes. They put Prince Charming's carousel here versus there, and the teacups here versus there, but it doesn't change the fact that it was still built in the 50s.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very much a product of that era. Yeah. And that you're right. Galaxy's Edge is very much a product of today, and it's very big.
Yeah.
It's huge.
When you're in Disneyland, when you're going through like Fantasyland and Frontierland and the walkways to get to Galaxy's Edge, and then you go into Galaxy's Edge and it's these wide pathways with all these big buildings, it definitely throws off the scale at Disneyland in that way that just Hollywood Studios doesn't really have that problem, because the rest of the park is already like that. Right. So it's not as jarring.
100%.
Man, I wanted a throwdown, man. Come on, I want to bet some wagers and sign some waivers here. Let's go.
Wagers and waivers. Well, I got Kendrick here to make sure everyone's keeping it nice towards the West Coast.
Yeah. Oh, so y'all ain't gonna let nobody disrespect the West Coast, huh?
There we go. Yeah, but I want to pivot now, though, to this is interesting, and actually shout out to Slimer actually for this, because he actually brought this to our attention. But this is fascinating. Theme Park IQ is reporting Disneyland filed a new permit for the Frontierland shooting expedition for upgrades to the electrical control cabinets and new LED lights. So this is fascinating. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about this, because
talk about being a Disneyland bias.
Yeah, well, there you go. Right there it is. No, but this is interesting because recently, maybe a month or so ago, maybe not even that long ago, we heard the news that Disney was closing down the shooting gallery over in the Magic Kingdom for a DVC lounge, which is, look, I'm not really like mentally invested in this. I probably haven't done it since I was like 16, to be honest. But if you're going to replace it, a DVC lounge ain't it. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that's besides the point. But it was kind of like this narrative, and I don't know if it's like just YouTube or like social media with like, oh, woke this and woke that. I don't know if that's what it was. And it just it was so out there that everyone just sort of assumed it was because it was problematic. They got rid of it. But it's interesting because here in California, here in progressive ass California, we're updating our shooting gallery. So in my opinion, this sort of, no pun intended, shoots down the theory that the Florida one is being shut down for problematic reasons. It's likely just because of money reasons. They just want the DVC thing there, and they just thought it was a good place to put it. That's kind of my theory now. I mean, I don't know. What say you, Italiano? Then I'll go down to Starship and then Slimer.
Yeah, I thought it was very kind of ironic in a funny way that, California, of all the states, was going to keep this when they could have used any excuse in the book to get rid of something like this. But I will say, now, I don't necessarily think that it's a huge moneymaker, but I do realize that there is subtle differences that in Disneyland Park, you still have to pay, even though it's quarters, quarters to $1, you still have to pay. So I could see where if Disneyland was to replace this with just to say, I mean, they probably wouldn't do anything as far as like with DVC, but then again, they do have the DVC kind of little outlet over by Grizzly where they have the Big Owl statue. So, I mean, they still could have done, but Disneyland's like, you know, why get rid of something that people are still willing to fork out money for, you know? And
but why wouldn't they just? You're right. But why wouldn't they just make it? Why wouldn't they just charge you to do the one in Florida? Then that just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, like just add the machines and charge people for it. You know, I just
probably because in the state of Florida, they're probably like, why should I put quarters in something that I just got right in my home?
There you go, George. Well said. Well said.
That's a good one. They used to charge here in Florida, by the way. They used to be the case back in the 70s and 80s. And I think it was like back in the 90s. They just made it, for free.
It's fascinating. Fascinating. What say you, Starship? Thoughts on this? Where do you stand with this, brother?
I'm surprised they're upgrading it in California, obviously. But what I'm more shocked about is that they just built that. What is that? That DVC tower, the Disneyland Hotel.
Yeah.
So you think they'd want to replace it with the DVC lounge here, but I don't know. Maybe it's that there's not enough room for one over here, like there is in Florida. I mean, I don't know where the shooting.
Now, kind of tying back to the Rivers of America a little bit with this kind of topic. Is it just me, or does it seem like that Disneyland's Frontierland still gives off that frontier vibe? Like when I walk through Frontierland at Magic Kingdom, I don't, even though I am physically walking through Frontierland, but it doesn't give off a Frontierland vibe. Like I remember they used to do like the Hodan dances and everything. They
still do that.
Oh, do they still do that?
Did you?
Oh, okay. Well, that's good at least. But I don't know. It just seems like every time, like with Frontierland, it seems like it keeps on getting stripped away little by little. And maybe that's why I feel that the Rivers of America should go, because it just seems like there's nothing going on over there.
It's a shell of its former self, kind of, is what you're saying.
Well, it definitely is. This was a point. This is a point I wanted to bring up earlier, where you're saying the river kept getting stripped down at Magic Kingdom, and you're right, because they used to have back in like the 80s and the 70s and 80s, they used to have these smaller sort of boats that were, I think they're motorized, but they weren't the canoes, but they were like smaller, and they were. But anyway.
They're called the Mike Speed keel boats.
Maybe, yeah, probably. I think that's what it is. You used to go around the river, then you had the canoes, and then they used to have two river boats. They used to have the one that opened with the park, and then a couple of years later, they added. It was called the Liberty Bell. Was called something else then. They called it the Joe Admiral Fowler, I think, and then they changed it to the Liberty Bell. They used to have two river boats going around. They used to have those other boats and the canoes. Now they only have the one riverboat and the rafts to get to Tom Sawyer Island.
You know what's fascinating to me though? The it's called the River Bell, right? The big
Liberty Bell.
White.
Yeah.
Okay, that's under refurb right now, is it not?
It was for a couple of days. It's back now.
Oh, it's back. Okay, that's weird to me that they're refurbing it and they're going to close it in a couple months. But maybe they're going to move it somewhere else.
Utilize the boat for something. I hope they do. Like I would really hate for them to kind of demolish that and break that down. That would be just a downright sin. Because you're getting rid of the river, even if it's a boat that's stagnant. Maybe make a. I think it was actually Slimer that mentioned this. Turn it into like a bar type of thing where you can like sit. They make built-in seats like around the boat that gives you like upper, middle, and lower views, and you could sit at a bar and what have you. I think that would be great.
You could position it in a way to make it upcharged fireworks viewing if you want.
There you go. Thinking like Burbank. Love it. Slimer, what say you about the shooting gallery and this weird sort of like it's okay in California but not in Florida thing?
Yeah, that's exactly how I interpreted it as, man. And if it wasn't for the fact that they shut down the shooting arcade recently to turn it into DVC, like I wouldn't have an issue. But like it's so tone deaf, man. Like the more I become a Disney fan, the more I become insulted as a Disney fan. I don't want to sound like a bitchin', right? But it's like it's so true. Like if you're a Floridian, right, and you see what's going on in Disneyland, and you see what's going on here. it's so clear there's a bias, man. And like, it's not even like, it's just laughable at some point. Like when I saw that they were upgrading, I laughed. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, right? Like this is Gavin Newsom. Like this is Gavin Newsom's California. You got Ron DeSantis in Florida. Like we should be getting the fucking machine guns and they should be shutting theirs down. Like what the hell?
I'm telling you, you're absolutely right, Slimer. It's crazy. And it's like they rub it in. It's like salt in the wound. Oh, you guys are mad over there. Here's a little salt. We're gonna upgrade Disneyland. You know, it's weird to me, but it's wild.
It's almost like Disneyland may have considered getting rid of it, but then after the fact, Walt Disney
they
World
saw that,
they're like, you know what? Yeah, let's fuck with them. Let's not only leave it, let's upgrade it.
Right, exactly. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, what can you do, you know? But you're right, though, Slimer. It is tone deaf. This is not... Now, technically, Disney didn't announce this. This is permit filing. So this is people kind of digging and finding this stuff. But
no, let's leave it. I like a throwdown.
There you go. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Well, George's case, I said, what can you do? Like in George's case, you just moved to California. I mean...
Yeah, right? Yeah, you just moved to Cali. Yeah.
Okay. I want to add a little more fuel to the Rivers of America fire.
Yeah, dude.
Also,
please, absolutely.
kind of ties into Fantasmic at Disneyland anyway. So we know they're debuting Disney Starlight, the nighttime parade at Magic Kingdom,
Right.
in summer next year. So I find it funny that they're going to have this new nighttime parade, and the parade route at Magic Kingdom goes right along Frontierland. So if it's going to debut in summer, does that mean that if you watch that parade in Frontierland, it's just going to be a bunch of walls next to you while you're watching that parade?
I think so.
That's actually,
And then more walls with the shooting gallery, unless they open it by then, the lounge. But if that's going to be a horrible viewing experience for that.
What a perfect way to debut the first nighttime parade back at Magic Kingdom and have a backdrop of construction walls.
And by the time those construction walls are down, the parade will be ready to glow away.
One could even say that the Magic Kingdom is to Disneyland what Wally World is to Disney.
Wally World, yeah. It's a great movie, by the way. Fantastic taste, Slimer. I love that movie. Very good, very good. But yeah, this is fascinating. Well, let's talk a little bit now about Summer. You were actually at the parks today at Epcot, right? And you got some great shots of this Communicore Hall. Let me go ahead and bring these up, and I'll let you kind of set the table here. But this is kind of fascinating. This has been this is why this is the controversial video. We're kind of talking about all the stuff that's like pissing off the fandom. This is one of the top on the list, right? This Communicore Hall. I'm kind of showcasing your pictures here, Summer. I don't know if you can see it, but if you want to go ahead and kind of let people know what your experience was today after experiencing this sort of flex space.
Yeah, this flex space. Okay, so my expectations for this lane was pretty much the same as everybody else's. That they were going to build a Communicore Hall, and that it was going to be a flex space, but that they were going to utilize it for high concept theming. Kind of like what you're getting over at the Summer Tribute store and at the Halloween Horror Night store over at Universal Studios. And if you've seen or if you've been to any of them, you know it's very high concept. Like they go all out. They spare no expense to make it feel like you're either in a movie theater or it's the 1980s. George and I were over there at Universal to see the Summer Tribute store, and it was it was absolutely amazing. So there was a lot of expectations that this is what this space was going to be. And a lot of that expectation was actually established by Disney themselves, because the first concept art that they showed was a very high concept themed area with Figment and art and things like that. So then when that didn't happen, people were just just wait till the Food and Wine Festival starts. Once the festival starts, you're really going to see this place pop. And then on the 29th, 2 days ago, it didn't. In fact, what ended up happening was the exact opposite. And at this point, it's kind of like par for the course for Disney World. I got to tell you, as a Disney Worlder, the first 2 words out of my mouth are, "I'm not surprised." Not surprised, right? So when they released the images of clothes on carts and all that's all it was, and there wasn't any high concept theming, I was just like, well, I'm not surprised. like at this point. Okay, so fast forward to today. I actually had the opportunity to go to the Food and Wine Festival, and when I went in, the first thing I noticed was how many people were in there. There you go, perfect. How many people were in there, and a lot of these people were either sitting down, chilling out, or they were in line for the food and the drinks that are served right there. And if you see those two red signs on the wall, okay, one basically says food, the other one says drinks. All right, massive line, and I started thinking to myself, well, is it possible that the reason they didn't go with like a full blown, like Halloween Horror Nights tribute store style theming is because they already expected this place to be, to be high volume traffic area. Because if it's a high volume traffic area, you're gonna have to get into crowd control, and this thing has 2 entry points. It become a little bit of a mess where the Halloween Horror Nights tribute store has 1 entry point, 1 exit point. So there's there's one through line of traffic. So I started thinking to myself, well, maybe the reason they didn't go with this really high themed concept was because they were expecting, this amount of people. So here's the conclusion, basically, long story short. I don't think that they made this high conceptly themed area because they didn't want to, or they didn't have the budget to. I think they did it just based out of necessity. I think there's just too many people there, especially on a Labor Day weekend. They're there to eat food, drink drinks, sit down and cool down when it's 99 degrees outside, to go in here and try to show off with, Figment statues and, what have you. So that kind of changed my mind a little bit, actually being there, as opposed to just seeing the pictures on Twitter and then, feeling some kind of way about it without actually experiencing the crowd levels in person. Because once I experienced the crowd levels, like it was a completely different story. Like I wasn't throwing shade at Disney at that point. It was just like, it seemed very reasonable to just throw in some merch at the very front and a checkout counter, and like that's it.
And call it a day. And if you do want to eat your drinks, I'm sure they offer you Jello shots, just to make that very clear. The Italiano, what say you? You haven't been to this yet, right?
Yes.
Oh, you have been to it. Yes. Okay. So you've also been. What were your thoughts about it? Like, it wasn't in use really though when you were there, right?
Correct. It wasn't this crowded. However, I will say, being that I got to actually visually experience it for myself, I can honestly say, when you're looking at it in a perspective like this, if you're just looking at photos or if you're looking at video footage, you could look back and say, oh my gosh, like the ceiling on this is atrocious. It's there's nothing to it. There's bare walls. It's very plain. It's very ordinary. However, when you're actually physically there and you just need to get to a building to kind of cool down, take a break, recharge
basically
and your phone.
Where can a Pennsylvanian go to cool down and have a pop, right?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, George. I had to.
You had to, bro. You took it. You ran with it, man. That this honestly, this is a great place. This building wasn't for the purpose of being aesthetically pleasing in the sense. It was utilized for, again, because they added consumer products to the parks, which eventually made it experiences. They utilized that as, this is a place to kind of put in these little pop-up shops, if you will. And, while you're sitting, relaxing, chilling, taking a break, it's like, oh, well, okay, well, if they're utilizing this space for merch, or if they're utilizing it for, specialty things, like depending on what like festival or event that's going on, then that's what this building is utilized for. And at the end of the day, Disney is a company and it's a business, so they'll find ways to kind of, say, hey, give us your money, in a sense. And as I said, and it doesn't necessarily have to be aesthetically pleasing to do so, because as I said, this building, when you're physically there, for me, it does the job. I didn't really necessarily sit in there. I mean, I did it for research purposes, but for a normie, going back to the normies, they're not going to sit in there, with their young children or what have you, and they're looking around saying, okay, let me see what aesthetically pleasing this building is, why rest.
Yeah, no, they're probably not. They're probably not. I just, yeah, it's interesting. What say you, Starship? What are your thoughts? Now, Starship, have you been to it yet?
No, I have not.
You haven't. Okay, what are your thoughts based on? Because I haven't either. So you and I are in the same boat. But what kind of vibes or energy are you getting from the pictures?
Well, as we all know, Communicore Hall and Plaza is the best new building to debut at a Disney theme park in the last 6 months. So, as we can clearly tell, it's an immaculate piece of Imagineering. That being said, it is also the biggest piece of garbage Imagineering has ever produced in the last 6 months. So, there's not much room here. So, okay, my thoughts on it is that it's terrible, like everyone else, and that this just using it as some merchandise just adds insult to injury. What I'm more surprised by is that the concept art they showed for this was not very complicated. All they had was a couple of statues and like little exhibits up and pictures on the wall.
Right.
How hard could it possibly be to put some goddamn pictures on the wall? And yet all we have is these blank, beige-looking pieces of shit. Sorry for my language.
Okay. So Starship, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So you don't like this?
There's a lot of nuance here, George. We gotta parse through it all. Yeah.
There's a chance.
Yes. No, but I can see what you're saying on that, Starship. And look, there are little things they can do here that I think would greatly improve it. I think that I understand the concept of a flex space, and they want to keep it flexible for any kind of event they have. And I get that. So you don't want to overload the area with like you were saying, something where high concept theming and all that, because that kind of gets in the way. It becomes clutter basically for when you're trying to use something as a flex space. Totally understand that. I think my biggest gripe is sort of like little things, like nitpicky stuff. I don't know, maybe use these carts, these rollout carts. This is like the stuff that my teacher would use to roll out the TV and the VCR when it was movie day in class. This can be, they could do better than this. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not even picky necessarily. I just think that I'm not asking for a lot. I just think that some of this stuff is just way too bare bones. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead, George.
I will say, not just with Communicore Hall, but just with majority of the overall Epcot overhaul, so to speak. And OG, you mentioned this several times on the channel. I feel like Epcot got the short end of the stick when it came to, because of the timing.
Yes, thank you, George. Because the timing was the worst possible timing. It was right. They announced it at the 2019 Expo, which was just months from the pandemic. The pandemic hit. Bob Iger said, "I'm going to save my legacy. Here are the keys to the kingdom, Bob Chapek. You handle it," right? So, and then everything was shut down. To top the whole thing off, then Bob Iger came back. So there was a lot of shuffling going on, not at just the parks, but just company-wide. Literally, Disney was in survival mode at that time, right? And this thing fell right in the middle of that. You know what I'm saying? And on top of that, we got a new head of Imagineering. Barbara Boza left. We got Bruce Vaughn who came in. There was just a lot of change, seismic change during this time. And I think, unfortunately, Epcot got the shitty end of the stick with that. And this is the end result. I think if they were to do the Epcot renovation now, I think it would have ended up a whole lot better. It was just bad timing, unfortunately, and it sucks because Epcot's a great park. It's it was really seriously, I always say Animal Kingdom was my favorite, but Epcot was not far behind,
And it's one of the circumstances that sometimes I wish that they would have just not done anything at all right then and there and just waited.
That's like the Tomorrowland thing at Disneyland. If you don't have the money to do it right, don't even touch it. Just wait until you do. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you're right, George. Sometimes you're better off just kind of waiting than to touch it. And because now what happens? Now they spent all this money into this stuff, right? Into this transformation. So that's kind of why I think we're not seeing at this D23 a whole lot announced for Epcot, because they just got a bunch of money poured into it. But it was money kind of how well spent was it? You know what I'm saying? It wasn't as good as it could have been, And if they would have waited, like, let's say they would have cut this plan when the pandy hit, held off and done it now, I think it would have ended up a lot better. So, and plus it just felt like it took forever. And I think that's partly why fans are frustrated, because we waited 75 years for these things to open. And so when it opens, it's like, okay, that's what took so long. So it's tough. It's tough, but I don't know. I don't know. Any final thoughts, Summer, before we kind of move on to our next topic?
Look, if it was made now, we'd probably have cars in the center of Epcot.
That's really funny you bring that up, Summer. I actually heard a rumor, and this is, again, it's a rumor. Who knows, right? I heard a rumor that when Chapek was CEO, that was actually one of the things he wanted to do for Epcot, was bring cars into that park. And the Imagineers looked at him like he was crazy.
I wouldn't be surprised if you've ever seen Cars 3, they have that whole simulator training thing in that movie. I would not be surprised if he was like, "Oh, let's change that to let's change Test Track over to that." I would not be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems very Chapek-y, very, very Chapek-y. You like that, George? Chapek-y?
Chapek-y. Yeah, that's another one add to the books.
Right, exactly. So let's we'll stay in Florida right now. We got 2 more topics. We'll stay in Florida. Monsters Inc. Land, or Monstropolis, is coming to Hollywood Studios. I think fans are supportive of Monstropolis, but what they're not supportive of is it replacing Muppets, right? I think people want this land. They just don't want it there, right? They don't want to replace our Muppets. And to be fair, there's a lot of context here with the Muppet land, right? It's more than just a Muppet land. It's Jim Henson's last work with Muppet Vision 3D, right? So there's a lot of sentimental reasons, nostalgia, right? So I'll start with you, Starship. What are your thoughts on this Monstropolis coming? Do you think it's going to replace Muppet Vision, or do you think it's more likely to go into the animation courtyard? Maybe it'll replace Rock and Roller Coaster. Where do you kind of stand with this?
Well, I hope to God it doesn't replace Muppet Vision, because that would be, first of all, you're already pissing people off with the Rivers of America. Do you really want to piss them off more by saying Muppets is closing?
Yeah,
I think that's a horrible idea. I hope it's Animation Courtyard, because Animation Courtyard is the Communicore Hall of Hollywood Studios. It is terrible. It is awful, and I think we should just one of the current rumors going with this is that they knock out Launch Bay and the offices behind there and the parking garage, and that's where Monstropolis will go. That is one of the rumors that also new WDW News Today has been saying a lot. That's what Tom has been saying over there, and I think that's what's happening. I hope, but there's also a lot of people saying Muppets, so I don't know what to think about it right now. I don't think it's going into Rock and Roller Coaster at all. I don't think there's any possibility it replaces that. You're replacing one of the most popular attractions in the park just to replace it with something that's probably going to be... you're not really going to gain anything out of that besides it'd be a lateral change,
That's fair.
There's not much you're getting out of that, and it doesn't really solve any of the problems that the park has right now. Putting in the Animation Courtyard essentially solves it solves a lot of problems. First of all, it fixes that area of the park. It gives essentially pure capacity boosts. I mean, you're losing a couple of meet and greets at Launch Bay or whatever.
Right.
It also solves thematic issues because Launch Bay is Star Wars and you already have Galaxy's Edge. So why is there another Star Wars thing that's not close to Galaxy's Edge, just like Star Tours is? So why do you have these 2 separate Star Wars things that aren't in the Star Wars land? Doesn't make any sense. So you get rid of Animation Courtyard, you solve that problem, you add capacity to the park, you add this amazing ride that, well, we hope it's going to be amazing, the Door Coaster, that everyone's been talking about for 20 years at this point?
Yeah.
And then you finally, it solves almost all your problems. Also, if you do Animation Courtyard, you could connect it to Sunset Boulevard so that you could have a loop and those dead ends will be fixed. The animation courtyard dead end and the Sunset Boulevard dead end, making it a loop. It'll make the park flow better, just like it did with Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland. So I think animation courtyard is the place to go. Now, we just learned they're replacing the Rivers of America, so I don't have faith that they will choose that, but I hope they do.
Yeah, no, that's honestly that's the ideal. It is. I mean, you want to get rid of animation courtyard if they can fit it in there with what they want to do. That's the money shot right there. That's what you got to do. You know, that would make the most sense. Animation courtyard is definitely the weakest link in that part. What's that, you, George?
I mean, just my own personal opinion. I don't see them getting rid of Muppets just yet, and I say just yet because at some point in time, and not to sound like a negative Nancy, but it's probably going to happen down the road, but I just don't feel like this is the point of time right now. For a couple of reasons. One, that concept art was based off of what, 2019, 2020?
It is old, yeah.
Concept art. So I think that they were considering it, but then as time went on and Disney was really seeing the backlash coming from, you know, the Disney fandom and Diz Twitter and all that, I think they kind of, you know, just utilized it just as like a show point for D23. But I don't think Disney really realized how fans would pick up on the distinct look of the location to say, wait a minute, isn't that the Muppets courtyard that they're showcasing that? But little did the fandom know that that is old concept art. Second of all, OG and I did a video kind of talking about this separately. And when he brought up the Google Earth and you look at the Muppets courtyard in the placement, now I'm not saying they can't widen it out if they knock everything down, but it's kind of a little bit of a narrow space kind of tucked away to the side of the park. And I feel like that there's just not a lot of breathing room that they would want for Monstropolis. Yes.
Well, here's the thing. I agree with you, and we talked about that. But there was one thing that I noticed on that map when I was rewatching the video in terms of Muppets, that there's a parking lot right behind it. That worries
the
me.
The parking lot for Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, that worries me. I didn't notice that the first time, because at first I'm like, oh, the Muppets is this like this little triangular little area, this Muppet courtyard. But then I didn't realize right behind it is that parking lot, and that does worry me a little bit because it's like they could theoretically.
So, do you think they would cut into the parking lot?
They might, if that's where it's going to go. That's what they might do. That worries me a little bit. You know, I didn't notice that until actually I rewatched the video. Like, oh shit. You know,
no, but it does make me still wonder, and I do actually agree with Starship about the Monsters coaster replacing Rockin'. The only reason why the only reason why I'm still not counting that out is because technically, 15 years ago, that was initially the original plan. So I don't know if Disney is still thinking about keeping that plan. Plus, with Aerosmith not as relevant as what it was in the 90s, and they just recently retired, Disney doesn't have to worry about licensing, out the copyright for the band itself and the music. However, as I said, I still agree with Starship. I think that's really not the best case scenario to kind of, because you want to put more in the park rather than just replace. And even though right now it's kind of outdated, the ride is still rocking right now.
Rocking. Well, and that's the thing, yeah, because even if you theoretically, like, let's say for example, you talk about you want to add to the park, right? If you take out the animation courtyard, even though you're technically replacing, you're still adding in that scenario though. There's nothing of value in that spot. So putting Monstropolis there is a huge add. You know what I'm saying? So that's the smart move, but oh man, I hope they do it. What say you, Slimer?
All right, so you had said money shot. Can you expand on that a little bit? What does that mean?
Oh, money shot. That would be the here. I think I have a drop for money shot. Here we go.
Brand new money, brand new hundreds, got a bunch of zeros like a bag of new Funyuns.
There we go. I haven't done the Little Wayne one in a while, so it's time. But what say you?
But when it comes to this Monstropolis, man, the way that I'm interpreting this is, and I like to look at this from the perspective of WDI and Walt Disney World operations, but it seems that there's a dilemma with regard to the precious amount of office space that is at Walt Disney World. It's known that they have a shortage of office space. It's why they're still using the the Art of Animation studios as office space for lower, middle level CMs. And even in the Muppets courtyard, they're using the old Muppet store that's been shut down for 5 years as a training facility for new CMs. Okay. So that's definitely taken into consideration when it comes to where they're going to relocate this training facility and where they're going to relocate the animators and the CMs that are using Art of Animation. And I'm pretty sure that there's pushback from WDW with that. The other problem is, that's a big problem. I don't think that you can really undercut how much of a dilemma that's presenting to WDI as far as to where they want to put this, because like Starship and George, and you've already said, Art of Animation Courtyard is ideally the place to put this because it would open up another pathway. It wouldn't just be a dead end road. Plus, it would just be an overall improvement to that area. But secondly, the other dilemma that they have is Aerosmith is now retired. Rock and Roller Coaster is a 25-year-old coaster, which has been largely problematic since they've installed it. It just came off of a 6-month refurb, and like the day it opened, it had issues. So operations, I'm pretty sure, is also telling them, hey, let's replace Rock and Roller Coaster. Let's gut this fucker. Put in that Vekoma coaster they want to put in there, and modify the facade of the building to match the concept art of the Monsters Inc. What is it, Monstropolis? And then, of course, it would require them to retheme the entire area, knock down the wall that separates Rock and Roller Coaster from the Lightning McQueen Racing Academy, which obviously you would have to do because everything would have to thematically be uniform. But you can tell the fact that we don't even know where this is going yet, and they've announced this over 2 weeks ago now, tells you that there's a lot of irons in the fire, and nobody has a good answer, because they're all good answers. Like it is a good idea from an operational perspective to replace Rock and Roller Coaster with something that's more efficient and that runs more reliably. Obviously, Aerosmith gone, bye. It is a good idea to replace a Art of Animation. It's probably not a good idea to replace Muppets. I would say, like, out of all the lands that this is speculated to replace, Muppets is probably by far the safest, just because of, like Starship said, it puts a lot of people off. It's also Jim Henson's last work, so it would almost be like blasphemous at this point for Disney, because they've already dropped the ball so many times with the Muppets. Like this would be, this would be like the nail in the coffin when it comes to what they did with that property. But as far as like where I would like to see it go personally, I'm going to agree with all you guys. It should go in Art of Animation. Like they need to figure out where they're going to put. Like if there is a shortage of office space, figure that out. But don't compromise the integrity of Hollywood studios for office space. You know what I mean? But I get it, because office people news alert, office people are petty.
Office people.
Not to mention, if you utilize all that space inside a theme park, like for office space, sooner or later, they're going to have to move them or replace it with something, Right. And these people should automatically know that. Now, since we're on the controversial topic with where Monstropolis is going, I do want to add a little bit more to this. And it was actually in one of the concept arts. It wasn't the one that looked like it was in Muppets. It was actually the one where it showcases the factory and kind of like the widespread, where it could either look like it's in the Rock and Roller Coaster space or in the animation courtyard. And off to the left-hand side, now again, this is all just kind of speculation at this point, because remember, this is concept art. You can't, as OG always says, you can't get married to the concept. You have
don't get mentally married to it.
Yes, but this, I hope Disney doesn't go this route. When I saw that Sully slide that was off to the left, and it's like, I'm sorry, when I watched Monsters Inc. and I was looking at all the spaces in Monstropolis, I don't remember seeing a Sully slide.
Yes, and I actually got in our Monstropolis video, I got a lot of shit because I mentioned it looked cheap and stuff, and all the parents were coming after me like, you don't understand, you don't got kids, and that's probably true. But you have kids though, George. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, from being a parent taking a child to Disney, fuck that shit. I'm sorry, I don't want to see a Sully slide. I want to see the immersiveness of what it looks like in the movie, and for me, it kind of takes you out of that element.
It's very cheap. You know, it's very McDonald's Playland or whatever, and I think Disney can do better. And and to be fair, like I said the same thing about the DreamWorks thing over at Universal. Like that kind of stuff is just really cheap, and even some of the Toontown stuff, to be fair, is like, what I'm saying. I think that
And again, they gear this stuff up for kids, but we got to remember this is Disney. This isn't for the kids.
Yeah, exactly. It's for us. It's for the diehard nerds. Come on, kiddos can stay out of it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But the last and final controversial topic of the evening is Pandora coming to DCA. Right now, Starship, you brought up a great point. If it goes into Hollywoodland, which look, that's kind of like the top rumor right now is that's where it's going, and it all signs point to that now because they're getting rid of the red car trolley. Like there's a lot of smoke. There's probably some fire with this. If they're getting rid of the red car trolley,
Fantasmic Dragon.
The what? I'm sorry.
You said there's a lot of smoke, but probably fire like the Fantasmic Dragon.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's if they're getting rid of that trolley, they're probably getting rid of Hollywoodland, which is, so if it's going into Pandora, if Pandora is going into Hollywoodland, what's going to happen to the parade route? And there's an excellent point that Starship brought up, because that Hollywood Boulevard is what they use for the floats. Are they going to reroute the parade? Are they going to work around it? Starship, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that they're going to somehow try to work it into the plan, or are they just going to reroute the parade route altogether?
That's the interesting thing, because so in DCA the parade starts in, I think it actually starts in Avengers Campus, or at least the very end of it, and it goes down that way towards the Hyperion, and then it makes a left.
Right.
Then it goes down to Buena Vista Street, and then it continues down towards Paradise Pier. Sorry, I'm not calling it Pixar Pier. Then so it goes that way. So if you put Pandora there, first of all, where is Pandora going to start? If Pandora goes there, is Pandora going to start at Hollywood Boulevard, or is it going to start behind that in the back lot and then go out into the bus? What's the bus loop right now? Because if it goes out there, then you can keep the parade route as is. But let's say you get rid of all of it. Let's say giant animation building on the other side is gone, the entire street is gone, and that's all Pandora. So what do you do for the parade? Because now there's no other way for the parade to go. What are you going to send it through, like, Avengers Campus and have it go through Cars Land? How are you going to do that? Where's it going to go through Pandora? Which brings up a bunch of other issues.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And what does this mean for entertainment in the park overall, right? Like, for example, let's say they do the route that you were talking about, Starship, or it's all of Hollywoodland is replaced. So you lose the parade route, but you also lose the Hyperion. You know what I'm saying? So you have two big entertainment things glowing away, basically. Unless they can figure out, look, the Hyperion, that's one thing. I think that's probably going to go, honestly.
I think the fact that there hasn't been a show in there since last year, and before that there was a show, hadn't been one since the pandemic, and there's been no indication that they're bringing anything back there, and all this Hollywoodland stuff, I think the Hyperion is gone. Even though,
I agree. I think honestly, just the fact that they didn't even make an announcement for a show to put in the Hyperion at D23, that was pretty much the nail in the coffin, because they mentioned the Tale of Moana and Hercules going on the cruise ships. They mentioned the nighttime shows, the parades and everything, but nothing for the Hyperion. And honestly, if that's the same fate, because they didn't even mention a new show going into the Fantasyland Theater, knock that fucker out too. I don't give a shit. It's like, especially because I'm sorry. I mean, if I had to pick and choose, the Fantasyland Theater, that is like so much real estate.
Back in my day, kids, back in the AOL days, right? when that thing was kind of new, we used to call it the Wonder Bra Theater because it has like, yeah, I mean, but that's what fans were calling it. People hate it. The fans hated that thing when it opened, hated it. But I still to this day think it's hideous. You know, I don't mind a show being in that spot, but build a proper theater or something in there. That very temporary looking thing is not it. And not in Fantasyland of all things. I mean, this big vinyl tent in this very whimsical Fantasyland makes no sense.
And literally, if you remove that, I can imagine like how much, as I said, how much real estate that they would have to add into Disneyland.
You could probably fit another ride over there.
Oh, easily. Yeah, absolutely. Starship. You could probably do like a Tangled ride or do one of these little like family coasters that they have, like the little Frozen thing or something. There's potential. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Pandora. This is the $1 million question. You know, my money was on Simba-Lot for the longest time, and now I'm like, I don't know. It's looking like Hollywoodland. And the red car trolley leaving kind of solidifies that a little bit. So it's wild. And then I want to ask you guys, what do you think, Starship? Do you think if Pandora goes in here, well, it is going in DCA, but do you think if it replaces Hollywoodland and there's no Hollywood connection, it's just Pandora's here, do you think they're going to change the name of the park?
I would say yes, but also it's very expensive to change it because to change all the signs, online stuff is easy, but change all the signs, all the marketing, everything. So that's very difficult from that perspective. So I could just see them saying, fuck it, it's in California Adventure. We're not changing the name. We don't want to. But I could also see them changing the name because of the Pandora thing. I don't know. I think it's more likely that they just keep the DCA California Adventure name and just don't even mention that it's not in theme. They just do it.
Interesting. What say you, Slimer? What do you think? What do you think about this whole Pandora situation?
So when you go to Animal Kingdom and you look at how they transitioned the main hub where the tree is, Tree of Life. And once you start walking down towards Pandora, they do it really smartly. What they do is they have a very neutral theming that isn't Pandora, but it isn't quite as thematic as what's going on in the rest of the park. Have you guys ever noticed that? They have a sit down restaurant on the right hand side as you're walking towards Pandora, and then once you're in Pandora, it's very obvious, but it's so subtle. And I think that if they do put Pandora on that side of DCA, I think that's where you're going to see out of Hollywoodland, or that means Buena Vista Street. You're going to see a strip of very neutral theming. Probably you're going to see a transition to like forest, but you're not going to see any of the bioluminescent colors. You're not going to see anything Avatar. And then once you turn right around where the Hyperion is, Hollywood Studios area, I think that the reveal is going to be pretty obvious. Like it's going to be a reveal. Like you go around a bend and boom, there it is, right? Kind of like it is here in Animal Kingdom, where you just don't walk into it. It's revealed to you. I think that's what we're going to get. I don't think you're going to make a left and boom, right there it is. They're not going to do that. They've never done that. So I think that's probably the route they're going to go. Now that's also going to mean that Buena Vista Street is going to be a whole lot of nothing if they take the same approach that they took with with Animal Kingdom. But it's going to be to serve the theming and then the reveal of Pandora once you get to Pandora. So.
Great point, Summer. And here's the other thing too. There's going to definitely be some foreplay going into this thing, right? The lack of a better word, where they ease you into this situation, right? You can't just like go from Carthay Circle, turn the corner, and they're like floating rocks and craziness.
Always works for me.
yeah, for George. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I think what might also happen. What was that, Summer?
George hasn't had foreplay in years.
There you go. Right? Yeah. No. What might also happen too is that whole lead up on Hollywood Boulevard, they could maybe re-theme a lot of these buildings because there's a military aspect to Pandora in Florida too, where it's not just beautiful rock work and waterfalls, there's like this militaristic sort of like mecha suit vibe going on in this thing. So it's possible that maybe they kind of take that maybe like the first few buildings in Hollywoodland and kind of make it like a military base that kind of leads you into this Pandora as you go further in, something like that. But basically, I'm kind of saying what you were saying, Slimer, where they're going to ease you into it somehow, whether you do it through trees, whether you do it through like a military thing,
or like even like science, like you know, like how it's like a scientific lab,
right?
Kind of thing where that could even work even into like for Avengers Campus. Like even though it won't be part of Avengers Campus, but it can kind of give off that same kind of aesthetic. So it's like where the street ends, where it meets Pandora and Avengers Campus, it can seamlessly move, whether if you move left for Pandora or right to Avengers Campus, it fits in.
Right.
Well, what I was thinking you could do is when you turn onto Hollywood Boulevard, is you could sort of engross the buildings in like vines and trees and stuff a little bit, and like slowly build in so there's more vines and trees as you get to Pandora, and then when you get there, then it just becomes full blown Pandora.
I love that. I actually really love that idea. That's pretty cool. Very, very cool. So it's kind of like you kind of see like the nature taking over along the way. And by the end of it, you got the onion blossom rock work and all the crazy waterfall. That's dope, dude. I really like that idea. I like that idea a lot, actually.
The only problem with that, though, is that it makes no sense in the context of it being Hollywood, and then it gets overgrown and becomes another planet.
Right, yeah. Aesthetically, it works beautifully, but you're right. In the overall, like, you know, theme and stuff, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle this with California Adventure.
Well, technically, it could kind of fit in well with the state of California because, I mean, they're keeping the Frontierland shooting gallery, so it's like, hey, we care about our guns, but we're going to let go of our shrubbery.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's absolutely wild. Well, here's the thing, too. The upside to retheming the whole park or changing the name, the upside to that is it really kind of gives them permission to go all out with the IP. Like, you change that thing to Disney Cinematic Adventure, and you could theoretically put Villain's Land in the symbol lot for an expansion. You can do a Polynesian Moana thing down. Like, you literally, like, the shackles are off now. You just go balls to the wall, IP everywhere. I can see how that would be very attractive for Disney. But like, to Starship's point, like, does it matter? They might just do that with the California name. So we'll see. You know?
Isn't it crazy how a company making a name change of their own park gives them permission to do more of what they want to do in a park that they own? Isn't that weird?
I know, right? I know. There is a little bit of this fan like ownership, right? Like, what are you doing to my parks, right? It's true, absolutely true, Slimer. This is a fantastic point, gentlemen. Really, really good conversation. We had a lot of great points today. Starship, it was great to have you back. It's been far too long. We'll have you on again very, very soon. I'll start with you, Starship. Where can people find you on social media?
All right. You can find me on Twitter at Starship824, and you can also find me on YouTube at Starship824.
Perfect. There he is. And then we have right above him, we got the Italiano right here, freshly shaven, kind of 5 o'clock shadow-ish. If you let everybody know where they
5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, it is pretty much. Where can they find you on social media, sir?
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me right here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info. And
Slimer, we know where we can find you. We got no camera, so you're probably on the shitter right now, right? Am I wrong?
Man, you saw me out, man. You caught me. That's exactly right. Hold on, guys. I got to flush.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Oh. No, just kidding.
Oh, excuse me. Whoa.
Whoa. And Slimer, if you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Yeah, you guys can find me on the toilet at Slime Square 84. And gentlemen, hey, listen, I appreciate you guys having me on. We teased out a lot of really, controversial ideas. solved all of Disney's problems. It's all laid out for free. Disney, just watch this video. Go ahead and implement everything we discussed today, nothing we didn't, and everybody's going to be completely happy and not unsatisfied here moving forward. So let's go.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, absolutely. Well said, Slammer. Well said. Thank you all for joining us today. Comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we talked about, the Rivers of America, the shooting gallery, staying and actually getting plussed in California, of all places, Pandora, Muppet Vision, Monstropolis, whatever you guys want to talk about. Comment down below. We would love to hear from you. And until the next time.